All right. So, in order to understand the whole concept here, we have to lay down a few concepts. So, what is feature flagging? If you look at it this way, feature flagging is just a way to allow developers to turn on specific parts of the code, turn it on or off, without altering the source code. So, if you look at it this way, as a person that writes code, I quite frankly probably don't care about the pretenses of, okay, we have to have this thing deployed at 9 o'clock. I just want to do my job. I want to keep doing my job. I want to keep doing my job. And I don't want to have a lot of risk associated with this. And so by having a feature, you can have a marketing person or a PM or whomever in charge of adding a specific group to your feature to do that versus them waiting on you. And so the cool thing about feature flags is that there's a lot of experimentation involved. So now you can test these new features with that select group for feedback or data-driven decisions. An example of that, Honeycomb rolled out a feature called service maps, which everyone pretty much knows what that is. But we had to figure out, okay, how do we differentiate and things like that? In order to do that, we had to create a few experiments. So the experiments were things like, what type of group should we add to this? So we have this layer of customers. Is there any niche things that we can apply to this? What type of iterations? What does that look like? And as an organization, if we're going to be all in, so from the very technical person of the group to the very non-technical person of the group, how do we all speak the same language and get all of what we need with that so we can have feedback and iterate over that? A little bit later, I'm going to share an exact example of that. And so having that experimentation and then mitigating the risk. So you want to be able to safely disable these features. You want to put yourself in a situation to where you're not scared on Fridays or peeing your pants when the whole system goes down and everyone's cursing. And so you want to put yourself in a way in which you're minimizing that disruption. So outside of just features, sometimes you may do that for a hot fix or something like that. And so then you have progressive deployment where you're gradually deciding to let this thing out into the wild. And finally, you have universal team control. And what I mean by universal team control is just that simply you're empowering everyone. So everything we do is a cross-functional experience, whether we like to believe that or not, simply because as a company, if you're X company, if you're Adobe, if you're Apple, if you're whomever, everyone makes up that company. And so if we're in the room and the PM and the engineer, the developer, the SRE person, platform person, whomever it is, if we all know the same thing, then we can do our jobs way better and like each other a little bit more. So in essence, feature flagging controls that flexibility and allows you to have reduction in issues in your product development, and it actually fosters agility. And then sometimes, what's not on this slide, what I like to mention is that sometimes people think that deploys are just a way to build out features. If you look at it this way, when you're deploying something, most times you have some type of sophisticated pipeline and you're sitting behind a diff, you're sitting behind a bunch of code reviews, you're sitting behind a bunch of stuff. And you just want to build out that cool thing and allow people to use that cool thing so you can have that instant feedback. And so deploying is for engineers, but releases are for your marketing and PM person who's like, hey, at 9 a.m., we're going to say that we have the biggest feature out there in the wild and we want people to use it. So with all of that, the second part of this is just embracing observability. So observability in a nutshell, it just provides insights on your complex systems and behaviors to understand how the system works. As time progresses, architecture has changed over time. And so the more and more we get into the weeds, the more intense it gets, the bigger it gets, the more it's like we have 25 different services. What are they doing? How do they interact? What's going on there? How can I not blame service A because my service is having a problem, service B is upset, and et cetera, et cetera. So as much as we mimic production, As much as we try to figure out what's going on, observability allows you to actually test and prod. So how do you know you're prepared? You don't. You can have a dashboard and it can say things that you already know. But when you have a customer, let's just say you have 3 customers that are having this issue that you've never seen before, how do you reason about that? You have to have a level of information besides just panning through the logs. You need to be able to have enablement with your, for example, support person when they get that information. Hey, this particular customer is having this issue. Okay, I don't see anything down in the system. Let's go into our telemetry data to figure out, okay, for this customer, I see these things happening. We can reason about that. And then we can say, okay, this applies to this service. And so we can talk to this team and things like that. You could be way more proactive in what you do. And so if you're not aware, tracing does capture that user journey. And what I mean by that user journey, let's just say, I don't know, I'm a boutique store and I'm going to have a customer that's going to log in, or I wouldn't even say log in. They're going to hit an endpoint equivalent. They're going to check out and they're going to buy some stuff. And what you see in that back end is that they hit these APIs, these services are interacting. You may see database query-like languages. You may see that business context. You're going to see that whole flow. And so those 30 or 45 services that I was referring to earlier that you have in your systems, now you can see all that information, and it makes it easier to understand if, because you have a new feature, a code change, or whatever it is, latency occurred, for example, or issues occurred. And that's how you accomplish understanding your unknown unknowns. You can't prepare for what you don't know. And so you need to have all that context to be smarter about what you can do to make those data-driven decisions. And like I said, is in production. And so now, real life, real time, you can understand what's happening. And so I kind of want to emphasize business context, because business context is what we live by indirectly without knowing it. And so right in that tracing code, you're just setting an attribute to say things that are important or that high cardinality data. So like your user ID or your feature flag key or your payment type, whatever it is, to tell that story. So if you're a service, you know there's important things that you're looking for the business, but not just you, right? So we write code and then we have a tendency to forget that there's other people who find this stuff to be important, just not in that way. So your PM may be looking for some context that they need to look for to understand what's going on. Marketing, sales, CS, all of these people may have context. You can add that right into your code and you can empower them to do the same thing. So, with all that being said, putting them together, what does that look like? So if I told you that feature flags allow you to roll out new features to a subset of users, however you want to do that, if you combine the two, then now it lets you monitor these features to perform things in real time. So now you get to understand how to track things like your user interactions, error rates, performance metrics for those flag features. Feature flags enable A/B testing. And so you have experimentation by exposing different feature variations to those user groups. And then observability tools, they're then going to allow you to collect that data to understand that behavior and measure the impact of those variations. And then when you look at it this way, when you have a feature flag and you're enabling that new feature, then you get a sense to quickly detect any errors. So as soon as you turn that on, that data is flowing. Boom, 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 boom. Once that data is flowing, now you're able to say, okay, I'm seeing as soon as this thing happens, then we're getting a bunch of 500 errors, or we're getting a bunch of weird things that we've never seen before. I've even seen where you may have had some third-party person come in because you're a small team to create some services, and now they are causing some weird latency and some weird SLO issues. Now you can see that. And if you're behind a feature flag, it's as simple as turning that off and disabling it. No, it never happened. And then if you have a new feature and it causes critical issues in production, then you have that, like I said, you have that emergency brake, that emergency lever to say, hey, let's quickly roll this thing back for all those users that we've impacted. And now you've put them in a small group. So just imagine as you're rolling out a feature, you're probably going to start off in beta. And so you're going to have a subset of users, and the subset of users are going to be users that meet a certain criteria. So that may be, okay, we're coming out with this feature because these five users or these five companies have said they needed this, and these are our biggest users. And since they're our biggest users, they represent a whole subset. And then we may have, I don't know, maybe a few smaller companies that have a niche subset so we can have even more users. And so now with all of that, you rolled out that thing and it's working really well for some users, and it's not. And they don't want to see that. You can take them out of the feature. You can add people into it. You can listen to what they're saying and add more features to it. And so you have a bunch of freedom that is for free, essentially. And so by combining feature flagging with observability, it allows you to be agile and make those data-driven decisions, and then enables you to continuously release and manage those features precisely with real-time precision on how's my performance impacting everything. So I like to tell stories. So the best way to share how that actually works without giving you all these boring definitions and things like that is to share a story. And so I picked a few personas and I will introduce them and then we'll go through that. And so this is my Supercharged team. So I like anime. And so their mission is to just deliver features that make sense, appear to users, and be reliable. So the money comes in because they're pretty cool. And so we supercharge folks. And so that's why they are the Supercharged team. So on the left here, we have the product manager. And she knows exactly what she needs. She's like that person. Backlog, forget that backlog. Give me my features, and I'm going to make the customer and the company successful. And then you have a sales guy. So the sales guy, he's always positive. He's always dressed nice. He's always spending the company money unnecessarily. But for some odd reason, he gets the big bucks, right? And so he does whatever it takes. And so he has that suitcase because he tells customers, hey, I have what you need in that suitcase, although there's nothing in that suitcase. And so he's going to be the guy that probably makes you upset, because there's always going to be a situation where someone is like, hey, our product does this. And then they come on board, they spend all this money. You don't want to return the money. And now you have that whole situation. And so in the middle here is the support person. And so I love support people because they deal with a lot. And so they're going to answer simple to complex questions. And what happens is they have to not only issue resolve because they're in front of the customer indirectly, but also after a while, certain tasks that they do, if they're getting the same questions over and over, those things become robotic for them. And the fourth person we have is the CSM. And so he participates in AR marathons. He's the one that hates early meetings, and he pulls the strings to ensure the customer is happy enough. And so that's why the customer is a little puppet there. And then from there, more than likely, he gets all of the compliments and complaints because, CSM is going to sit on the call and have to deal with it. And then last but not least, we have an SRE. And so she's out here destroying incident fires, and she's blasting through issues like latency and availability with the stroke of a keyboard and cursing. All of the features are equally important to her because they are. If the system goes down, then that's what it is. And so this is my team, and they have been tasked with a new feature, and I've just called it exclusive feature. And so we're going to walk through how that works. And yes, I have intentionally left out a developer. So if we're going from left to the right, or the start of the process. So as we know, a feature works a few ways. If you're doing PLG, product-led growth, or whatever the situation is, someone said, we need this. Whoever that was said, we need this. And so now we have a product manager who's going to go in, and she's going to collaborate with a lot of teams. So Eng, sales, CS, marketing, all of this to ensure that the customer has a positive experience. And so with observability, she's going to be able to understand like how well the experience is actually going. Is the customer journey through the feature as expected? There's been situations where the PMs have been able to use observability by just putting a few attributes like feature key. And that feature key allows them to understand that this is the feature that they're looking for. And things like, okay, well, this is our user ID, and that user ID is an actual ID. And then there's also a field for an actual name. And so now they know who they added to this, what's going on. Sometimes you roll out a feature and you think you know it all until you don't know it all. And you can see the user journey where, okay, the customer has sloughed off. We expected them to do steps 1 through 10, and they really did steps 4 through 6. Well, what happened there? Maybe the steps suck. Maybe you didn't need to do that. Whatever that is, that PM can see that, and it allows that PM to fine tune. My favorite part in all this, PMs and backlogs, it's a love-hate relationship, more hate than love. And so now they're able to understand, hi, I'm an engineering manager, or hi, I'm an engineer. I can't do this. I can't do this because the feature sucks. Look what's happening. And they can go and see that. Or we have liable backlog work that will impact this feature. And so now the PM is empowered and can stand next to you and say, okay, we got to take a step back and do this stuff. And so outside of that, like I said, are your folks using the product? Can you see those real-time decisions? As that feature rolls out, is it doing what is expected? Is it impacting anything that we can see? Is our user experience tied to what we see? And as they talk to customers, is it impactful? And they're going to be able to use that to control the expansion of those features and decide if this was a good experiment or a bad experiment. Imagine going through a feature, rolling it out, and you haven't done enough research to know that nobody's using it. That sucks. You've done all of this work for no reason. And so they're going to refine that based on the feedback. And then that information is going to allow you all to understand, you all as in not just engineering, but your CS, sales, all those people. Who does this apply to? How can we get more people to use it? Things like that. And so then you have customer adoption. So your CSMs identify customers who meet that criteria for that feature. So if you look at it this way, your CSMs are going to own that business relationship. No one but the CSMs want to be on the call with the customer, good or bad. And so they're going to be very intimate. And so up front, they're going to be able to provide a sense of, hey, for this feature, I think these customers are cool to use. And after, hey, these customers are cool to use, I talk to them every other week and they're complaining. This was horrendous. This whole process was horrendous. Can we fix it? They're going to be able to tell and get that feedback. A lot of times, a key source to understanding things is that, I guess, if you look at it this way, it's that field feedback, where the field people will tell you what actual users are sensing. And most times, it gets a little, I guess, watered down. And so the whole process is going evolving door. And so we can tighten that up by understanding and being intimate and intentional about the data that we have. Then it makes it much easier. Also, since they're aware of what's happening, they can provide more details to support. And so another cool loop in this is that a CSM traditionally is not a technical person. They may have a technical counterpart, but they're not a technical person. And so they're going to go back to support and say, hey, I sent this person your way. This is what's going on. And you can have issue resolution much quicker. You can have iterative loops much quicker for engineering to fix that feature. And then you can share that variable or that valuable information to product and to marketing so they can strategize how to market better. And so SRE to the rescue. So we all know, I'm going to make a huge assumption. We all know what an SRE does, right? And so they're going to monitor that performance of that feature because they don't want disruption for the users. As I said before, all of it's important. And so if you have a user on a feature flag, if you have a user on your standard things, et cetera, all of that is important. So now with having a feature flag, they're going to be able to understand what customers bought into the feature, and they're going to be able to monitor that continuously. And so you're only as big as your biggest customer, right? And so I've experienced this personally. As SaaS, you're going to onboard a customer, and the biggest customer is always your biggest customer, but that's always your biggest variable because you don't know how that's going to impact your system. Just imagine rolling in a customer that is 8 times as big as your last customer. How does that impact your systems? How are you going to understand if this is a performance impact, if it's a financial strain? How many errors correlate with this? Should we be able to roll this back? Can we isolate what's going on there? Do we need to change our SLIs? All of those things are important because when you have a new customer, if they're impacting your SLOs, essentially, do they translate, or I would say, do they meet whatever your service level indicator is? And so your success criteria, they may be excluded from that. And that's important to know. And so because of that, your SRE becomes your observability shield. And so they're going to be on standby for that golden customer. They're going to look into that. They're going to see what's going on to understand what are the unknown unknowns, because we do want all of our customers to be successful. So observability and feature flagging then becomes the support person's toolkit, because they're going to receive the basic information about, hey, I think I saw something in my email and I don't know who to talk to, but I don't want anybody to talk to me about buying anything. So they're going to go to support. Or, hi, I looked at your docs and they're cute. I followed the instructions, but I don't know what's going on. That's typically what they're going to see. And because of that, support can use observability and feature flagging to correlate the trends of issues, to correlate, does this issue correspond with this feature, et cetera, et cetera. And also, they're going to be able to understand if it's a SEV 1, SEV 2, SEV 3, or whatever people are calling incidents nowadays. Simply because support gets an incident and, oh man, this is our highest paid customer. It's hot, even when it's not hot. And so now they can reason about it being hot, and they can also say, hey, here's the trace for this. Hey, this is the information I saw. These are the trends that I'm seeing. We need to do something about this, or we just need to roll them back off the feature, or you probably need better docs, stuff like that. And then another thing that people don't forget, is that sales does have a influence our business impact. And so for them, once you give them tools to understand what the system is doing with feature flags, now they're able to actually identify certain customer segments. They're going to be able to work with marketing to say this thing works really well for this team, or it doesn't work for that team. They're going to be able to drive the stick of success. They're also going to be able to convert different customers. And so just imagine you're coming out with a new feature and folks don't know how to sell it, or the market is your competitor. They're talking to the same customer that your competitor is talking to, and the leverage is something that you don't have, or the leverage is that this is a differentiator, this feature, but it's not doing that thing. They're going to be able to work with product to understand how to extend that to different customers, fix the thing, or whatever the case is. And so normally a salesperson say, yo, I have a customer, they're in our pipeline and they want X. Can we get X? Or even, oh, I heard we were working on X. they didn't think to figure out if X feature was ready. And so now you're in a situation where it was an overcommitment to something. And so this provides better insights on that. And so I've seen sales actually use observability products to determine what customers are using it so they can have actual business use cases. And so for someone technical, that's important because the more you know the tech stuff, so the more non-technical context you get, the better it is to understand the meaning behind what you're doing and how you can improve it. And so, in summary, feature flagging plus observability is love. So success is a team sport. If you have both together, then you can provide everyone with the insights that is needed to be successful. And team collaboration is key to any of this. And so you're only as strong as your team. And so your feature is only going to be as great as the collaboration that you actually put out to give better insights that are consistent. And then business context lessens your stress. And so if you are technical or non-technical and you can speak the same thing, it's kind of like a marketing niche. If we all work at the same company and although I'm not technical, I still understand what's happening, that's pretty cool. And everything is an experiment. I always tell people go have fun. And if you're behind a feature flag, you can build a bunch of shit that makes no sense. And you don't have to worry about it. You can keep doing your job, keep doing your job, keep doing your job. And then the last point here, Leroy, you deploy, let PMs or marketing release. And so don't forget that deploying should not dictate what you provide to your users. So continuously do your job, continuously keep working on the thing. And when it's time to release, someone will release it. So that's all I got.
Any questions? Wow, no questions at all. It was super clear. Oh no, sorry, my bad. Jogging all the way up there. Sorry.
Hi, really cool presentation. So, was this based on your experience with Honeycomb, or you're talking also like, general?
Do you mind if I curse?
No.
Both. So I've dealt with all kind of crazy shit. And so, and I've had all types of customer and non-customer facing technical roles. And so most times what I find is that the loop is that everyone is siloed. Like that is just like a thing. Like we can create all types of things, even from like DevOps, people are still siloed, things like that. And so a lot of this came from at Honeycomb, observability is a culture. And so you're forced to care about things that you don't care about. And then when you're a startup, you're also forced to care about things you don't care about. So that's where a lot of that came from. Just understanding the different perspectives and how important they can be.
Great, at the very end of the room.
Oh, you're way back there. Hey, I don't have my glasses on so I can kind of see you, but not really.
Sorry. There we go, man.
Yeah, thank you very much for the talk. It was really interesting. I have just two questions here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've had experience with like feature flags and experimentation, but from like the product side of view. And what I've noticed in the past is that the actual monitoring and operations dashboard do not usually reflect those feature flags. So you would have your whatever product you're using for the feature flag or experimentation show you how the product is doing or how the user is doing. But when you go to the actual metrics, like you're trying to check the performance of your system, you just see the overall one. So you can't really tell how much impact those feature flags the new feature you've released is having in the overall application. Like you can't really like segmentate it or like separate it. So I wanted to know your suggestions in that area. And the other question was about the challenge DevOps SRE people usually have with like showing metrics to like the product or the business users. So usually they want like transactional data and they usually like go with it. So if you show them like, oh, this is like 2% error or this, you've done 1,000 transactions based on the maybe like some front-end metrics, maybe user clicks or something like that, that just shows you like the pattern. So instead of them looking at it from the like a probability point of view, whereby things are down by 5%, they usually want to know the concrete number, and you usually get that later on from like transactional data. So trying to convince them to say, okay, big data, you don't always get accuracies. It just gives you an indication to when the data goes into the actual transactional system. So it's like that education piece. How do you go about it?
Okay, so question number 1. Do you use tracing?
Yes.
So in your tracing, you can add your context in there for what we did at Honeycomb. A lot of the times when you want to segment things, we would wrap around a thing like a feature key or a feature name. And then that way it tracks the whole user story. And so now I can see who did what, when, and why for that feature. And so I would say add that context to your first question. And then now you can correlate. I have no idea what product you're using, but most times in the pillar of observability, you have your metrics, logs, and tracing. And fundamentally, they're different things, right? And so you can layer your metrics alongside that tracing to figure out what the impacts were. But in order to tie that together, you would need to have your context for that.
Cool.
The second part that you mentioned, I would start off with, as I recall of what you're saying, non-technical people are asking technical questions, right? So I would start off with, do I have an SLO? And so an SLO has technical things in it. So the SLI is going to have that indicator of what success looks like, but fundamentally you start off with a user journey. So what is the statement there? And I would negotiate what that should look like and then go from there. A lot of times the business wants something and we can translate it into technical terms and present it that way. And once you've negotiated on that, then that's what that is. And then we can iterate over it. That way you're not looking for weird variances and everyone is aligned on it.
Cheers. Thank you.
All right, last call for last question. Oh,
Hey Alayshia, great talk. Any open source vendors that you like to recommend for feature flags?
Open feature.
Open feature? All right.
Yeah, they're open feature is doing the same. Well, I wouldn't say doing the same, but there's a lot of vendors that are in the space that are applying, or I would say contributing to open feature. Like for example, I know for a fact Launch Darkly is one of them. I believe Split, but don't quote me on that. And if someone from Split is here, please say something. But I would use open feature.
Okay, thanks.
all right. Thank you very much.